la famille.
Hi guys, thanks for being here tonight. Any designers here tonight? Yeah? Okay, sure. Okay, I see you. Okay, so I hope you will learn something. I'm not quite sure about branding, but hopefully. So you let me know after the talk is done. My name is Julien. I've been freelancing for 7 years. I've been a graphic designer for a little bit more than 10 years. And worked for several startups during my freelancing time. Most of them are quite known as Behance in the US, Wecar in Paris, Zenly recently. And so I cannot talk about all of them tonight, but I'll make sure to talk about just these two mostly. Igloo is community messaging app I'm co-founding for the last year. And Zenly is, you might know these guys because they just launched last week. If you don't know them, just download it. You will like it. I will use these as examples. So enough with the self-promoting part. Let's talk about mobile branding a little bit. Before we just talk about the why and the how to integrate branding accordingly, we'll talk about history. And there is quite a barbaric name I'd like to explain. Maybe some designers know it. Oops. Skeuomorphism. This is something, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it actually, but this is something we used a lot back in the days because it was used to explain this kind of trend to mimic real-life objects within UIs. So I'm pretty sure you all remember this. It was not so long ago, I think 4 or 5 years ago. Pretty strange. The address book on iPad, mimicking a real-life book. Even the page marker was symbolized there. I was guilty as well. Used to design interfaces like this. It was pretty successful, but I'm not quite sure I would design this again today. Anyway, this was kind of a skeuomorphism era, and it was part of 2 distinctive major trends and design shifts for the past 8 years. One is skeuomorphism, and the other one is minimalism. This is some kind of era we are in right now, so I'll talk about it later. And in skeuomorphism era, not so much attention was given to the content and the ergonomics. The main focus was really on the look and feel and the aesthetic. We were more focused on the stitches rather than how our typography looked. So it was kind of distracting. It was a lot of Chrome was really annihilating all the Chrome and all the content and all the text and the precious information we used to have there. It was also quite challenging as on the producing side. As designers, we often used to work entire weeks just for a single view of UI, just to make it beautiful and not kitsch. So it was really challenging and really costly. On the other side, it was pretty fun to design such apps. It was really unique in a sense. Users loved it. There was really a nice part of branding on each application, and it was pretty distinctive. As I said, it was unique and has a dedicated look and feel. So nowadays, it's more about a minimalism era. It came out with iOS 7 2 or 3 years ago, thanks to Google Material Design as well. And we really went through deep changes compared to what we had in the past. So it basically changed everything. Most details and visual assets in the UIs were becoming more content-centric, but there were downsides as well. And one of those was the kind of dullness that was appearing at the day. So it was kind of a collateral damage because we were used to have pretty luscious user interfaces. And then the day after iOS 7 came out, we just had this kind of user interfaces. As you can see, most of the time, Apple is setting the bar pretty high when it comes to trends and user applications, user interfaces. So we were kind of lost and didn't know how we should differentiate ourselves with the new applications and the new trends. We also noticed the rise of what we could call abstract applications. So this is the kind of applications that are really innovative, but they often lead to confusion. One of those is ViscoCam. I'm pretty sure you guys all know ViscoCam. It's a really powerful app to edit your photos, adding filters, really nice filters actually, and then you can export it on Instagram and other social media. Honestly, use this app several times a week, but I still cannot figure out how many of the feature works over there. The navigation is pretty dark as well, and I think ViscoCam is a pretty good example on how branding can get compromised with usability. On the upside, legibility and accessibility were greatly improved thanks to this new focus on content. Many apps fully embraced the ergonomics and the comfort. So then we decided also to have a better focus on UX as a general matter. So as toning down visual effects, we did not have to focus again on making pretty nice stitches, working on leather, working on some kind of dust texture or paper texture in our interfaces. We decided that it was time to release some pretty nice tools and software and focus more on prototyping and animations. So this is one of them. This is Principle. There is also Flinto, Pixate. Many of those are pretty cheap, available online. And even if you're not really familiar with the design, you will get a really quick use to it because it's really well explained. There is a strong community online, and you can get pretty much any information you want. So don't hesitate to prototype some quick animations because it will help you to see and preview how your brand will integrate later during the final stage of your application. So scoring the internet, this is the one definition I think is the more appropriate when it comes to mobile branding. I think the keywords here are really in identity and differentiation. So this is pretty much preparing the next step of the presentation. Why should you stand out, and why branding matters so much? So here are some advices. First, I don't think focusing on just an application is the key. I think you should build a general brand. Consistency is key, meaning that don't think about just an app. Think also on your business cards. Think about your website. Think about your Android app because you just started on iOS, and also think of your pitch deck maybe, because as a general matter, you should let your brain shine through all your communications and not just your application. I think that today, especially on the mobile industry, minimum viable product isn't just enough anymore. We all know that competition is pretty fierce. So MVP doesn't mean and doesn't give you the right as well to just code it a day and throw it on the App Store and say, okay, we have an MVP, everything should be fine. Unfortunately, it's not really true, especially in B2C and software as a service businesses. So you only have one chance, pretty much, to conquer your users and show them that you really understand them by using a pretty clever branding integration. So go for that extra mile. Spend a little bit of time to add some personality and some brand in your app. A good example of this is Down to Lunch that you probably have heard lately. There is some kind of myth running around them, and some said, even themselves said, that they released and developed this application within just a day. So I'm pretty sure it's not even true. But even if you don't like this app, these guys put just the extra mile I talked about earlier and went through adding a little bit of personality. So the colors, the buttons, the text, the icons, there is no really, there's nothing consistent on the application, but it has a personality and a pretty strong one, actually. Next, I'm not a growth hacker at all, so I cannot show you any graph or statistics about what I'm going to say. Actually, it's more about personal experience and what my clients experience as well. So first, it's about user acquisition. We're all concerned about this, of course. I think a well-executed brand will automatically lead you to a better user acquisition. I cannot think of a better analogy than a restaurant. When you go to this fancy and favorite restaurant you love, you will enjoy eating organic meals, probably homemade as well, and you will eventually come back. And it's, of course, exactly the same with the applications. So as long as your users will love your app and how they feel about it when you use it, they will come back and they will not delete your app. So user retention is actually the same. It's just like the fancy restaurant, they will come back. And the last part, which is a pretty important one, is evangelism. The same users that will use your app, chances are they will even talk about it around them. And this is the most important part about the growth, is that it's really an amazing opportunity to get both organic growth for your product and kind of creating some power users. Because these guys are actually early adopters. They will talk about it, and they will be your best asset outside the team itself to talk about your brand, to talk about your app. So don't neglect these guys. Also, who doesn't like free marketing? So how do we get started in integrating a proper branding inside an application? First, this is kind of boring, but it's essential in my opinion. The device guidelines are really a good and a great starting point. Many advices and basic informations are available there. You will learn something, I guarantee you this. Actually, myself read this 2 or 3 times a year. It's not really long. It's less than an afternoon to just going through everything. And I still learned a lot of things from it. So make sure to give it a look sometimes. Also, there are many more than Apple and Android, but everything is free, available online, and most of the time you don't even need to create a developer account to use it. So go ahead. This is the kind of quote you can get from the iOS, for example, iOS interface guidelines. You can get the key is to create delightful and memorable experience to users. So again, this is the kind of example you will read inside the guidelines. It's just remember that on a tiny screen, the amount of space available is really too precious to waste it. So your app is not, you should use your brand very cleverly. That doesn't mean that you should use your logo anywhere, everywhere, because it's such a small space that your users will probably abandon it already if they see your logo on each screen. So remember, be subtle about it. Look at other apps, what they've done. Is Airbnb using their logo everywhere? Nope. So don't do it. It will definitely not serve you. It will only serve your ego, actually. Next, for the guidelines. Brand guidelines are pretty important as well. So most of the time, it's a designer kind of job. It can be really time-consuming, especially in early stage in a startup or on the conception of a product. I myself didn't do it for my own company. I was starting 1 year ago, so I'm pretty late for it. And I'm still in the process of creating brand guidelines for my own clients, and they're still waiting for me. It's pretty long and it's pretty tedious, but it really help onboard next designers, marketers, because they know where to go to use the brand effectively and to use it in their own pitch and in their own talks. So, sorry for the blurry image. Branding isn't only about pretty images. It's also, and definitely also, about the story you tell every day to your users. So, it's more about storytelling and copywriting. Most of the time, as a designer, you will have to have this multitask job of not only creating assets, but you will also have to use a clever branding for the client. What should I say within this button? What should I say within this title, under this icon? And so if you can, don't hesitate to delegate this task to someone fancier than you with words, because this will definitely serve you. In Igloo, we have someone that's doing this every day, and it really helps the whole team doing it, so go ahead. Or maybe if you have the means, hire someone to do it. Last but not least, the main goal is truly to delight your users with your branding and how you use it within your app. Actually, it doesn't matter in what startup or in what industry you are currently working. It could be fintech or even the social media. The ultimate goal is really to provide your users with a delightful experience. Fred talked about it just earlier. This is definitely true. So let's go through the best practices and use cases and see how I can help you with this. First, it's mostly about fonts and colors. I think these are really the backbone of your app. This is most of the time the first thing your users will see, and you will be judged on this global aspect of your app. So you need to choose them accordingly. Fortunately, you can have access to many great system fonts today, which was not quite true before. For example, San Francisco is now being used in iOS, and many other Apple platform, OS X, or even Apple TV now, or even the Apple Watch. And on the other side, on Google and Android, you can get, in fact, Google and other assets, Roboto and Noto. Of course, there are many others. OpenSong, for example, is overly used for the 2 last years because it's free. It renders quite nicely on a big and a small screen. So this is why most designers use it. And also there are free and paid library like Typekit, or Museo100, for example, comes from an independent typographer, which of course pretty costly, but most of the time you will have a pretty unique look by using this type of font. Don't go too fancy. Not all fonts are good to use. Think, as a general matter, think about the message and the image you'd like to communicate to your product and to your users. For example, so this is the Igloo application UI. In this application, we address to both businesses and users, but truly the only users matter because they are the one who really use the application at the end. So this is the guys you really need to convince. They know best. In this regard, fonts and colors and some various UI assets here are based on the IC graphical universe. What pretty easy and straightforward. The application is called Igloo. We actually couldn't have gone more subtle, but we really wanted the application to have a strong stance, a strong personality, easily recognizable, because the field is pretty bloated in the social network area, as you know. So we really need to address our audience properly. As a second example, there is Zenly. They decided to go with a bright and a really vivid color palette. And this is really a nice choice because their main audience are actually teenagers. So it's pretty important that they manage to turn something pretty boring and creepy, because using a map to stalk your friends isn't really appealing as a main feature. But thanks to their UI overlay and how they decided to use their branding to integrate within the application, they turned something boring and creepy into something fun, easy, and pretty to use. Next, it's really about consistency. Your brand should be, as I said earlier, you should be consistent across all platforms, at least where your product belongs. So I didn't work on this app. I wish I did. I didn't. Captain Train. Its ergonomics and navigation are totally different between the two platforms, but their brands isn't. As you can see, the UX is pretty much the same. The ergonomics are quite different because you do not use an iOS app the same as an Android app. So always keep this in mind, because you can have troubles if you first design for an iOS for 6 months or a year, and then you just decide to go, hey, let's use the same interface in Android and go for it. This won't work, because now I've learned this today. Android, Google will call you and say, we cannot release your app because there is not enough material design within your app. Material design is basically the new OS, the new trend Google is using within Android. So remember this when you work on this. Interface icons here are branded as original Captain Train icons, but they still adapted those to according to the device guidelines. As you can see, they communicate the exact same message, but they don't look exactly the same between iOS and Android. So iconography plays really a huge part in both being functional and aesthetic. Icons are really a visual clues that can relate directly to your product and brand. In fact, app icons, for example, are traditionally the very first relationship you have with your users. So you better don't mess it up. The first time they stumble on the App Store or the Play Store, they will notice your app icon. So it's really important to make sure you communicate the right message. In this matter, this is the Igloo app icon. We think the app icon isn't necessarily should be your logo. There is a difference between the logo and an app icon. In Igloo, we're definitely not a global brand, and we didn't release anything yet. So we think we'll probably go with a more fun and branded way instead of just something abstract with this igloo shape. On the other hand, Facebook, Twitter, Airbnb, they have nothing to prove. They can go with basically any sign, anything that we choose to change the branding. This will work because they have already their audience and there's nothing to prove. This is exactly the same with Zenly. You guys might think, why a pop cycle? What is the link between a pop cycle, ice cream, and a geo-tracking? And actually, there's nothing in common. And this is a really good thing, because their goal was to satisfy their main audience, again, teenagers. And they really wish to go as far away as possible as the geo-tracking feature. This is something that really stopped people, and they needed to turn it into something more playful, kind of like a game, and something fun. So always in iconography, devil is in the details. This is something really true with interface icons, for example. So here, I designed some car category icons while working with WeCar recently, a year ago or 2 years ago. And we decided to create these icons to integrate more subtly the brand and to have something really original, really proprietary for WeCar to use, instead of just a generic library. And so these icons were really created with many multi-platforms in mind. And besides some quick changes, you will be able to use those on website, on the iOS application, and probably even on the Android app. I think they still do. So next. A great way to communicate your brand is to design, for example, a unique set of emojis. So this is what we have done with Zenly. And we went through this unique emoji look and feel. It's pretty fun, it's pretty goofy, and it relates completely with the brand. The UI, the communication, the pop cycle logo, it's completely adequate. Of course, if you work in fintech, this won't work. So you need to be smart in your choices and try several things before you go live and address your audience properly. Last, again, you don't have a lot of room on your smartphone screen. So this part is really important because you will need to identify the key and the critical moments on your applications. For example, onboarding new users, signing them up, empty states, what happens when you have no data within your applications. These are key and critical moments where you can cleverly use your branding to serve the application and the users well. For example, this is our current onboarding process for Igloo. So onboarding provides both information about your product, what does it do, how do I use it, and also it can really enhance your user acquisition. For example, we think that adding a little bit of interactivity on the full screen right before, usually you select an avatar after you upload your own photo, after you have been signing up or during the process, but we think that playing with the branded avatars and some cute icons before the users even sign up will probably help more to signing them up at the end. So I think we all know this animation. It's Twitter-like animation. You also have kind of the same on Facebook. Many social media now use this. The thing is, you really need to make this, to make the tiny bits, the tiny pixels, the really small attention, and this will make a pretty good difference. If you give your frequently used features some extra care and extra love, it will feel rewarding for both you and your users, because this is something that we really love. So it goes with the Twitter-like animation, the Facebook animation, sending emojis in Zenly. There is something rewarding and there is some kind of feedback by doing it. Zenly again. So traditionally, the launch and the loading screens in applications were used as some kind of logo and ad placeholders back in the days because smartphones were pretty heavy and slow to launch. When you use the application, I don't know if you guys remember, but often takes 5 or 10 seconds to launch. And so there was some kind of blank screen, and it was really problematic. So some shady guys tried to put some ads there and monetize this, but it was really not a good idea because users were thinking they were using the wrong app, so they just quit. You can still do something nice and go creative by using this kind of animation, a space to greet your users, to communicate a good message about it, and this will make your users pretty happy. Besides images, iconography, and words, there is also pure UX. Some apps are pretty well known and instantly recognizable by their UX. For example, gestures can be a dominant part of the brand. I'm pretty sure you guys know Tinder. So whether you like Tinder or not, they truly globalized swiping as a core feature. Swiping cards in Tinder basically is the part of the brand. And even if you hide the logo, if you hide the names, the photos, just put 2 squares with the swiping features, you will think about Tinder pretty much. So adding gestures is pretty cool. but should be carefully considered because discoverability can be a problem. Snapseed is another of this application. This is the photo you will edit is the heart of the content. There is absolutely no branding in the screen because the main feature of Snapseed is to edit your photo. And again, about swiping, the main core feature and their branding is to use vertical and horizontal swiping. So you need just to interact with the photo. And even though this needs a little bit of understanding at first, when you first use the application, you don't even know where to go, users will eventually get used to it. And at the end, this will result in a sped up process, and they will go even faster with the frequent use of the app. So it's both a win-win condition for you and your users. That's it. You can follow me on Twitter. Also, we're in beta testing soon with Igloo. Please register. And Zenly is also here tonight. These guys hire developers, designers. They're pretty big. They're pretty cool. Make sure to say hi to them later. And that's it.
Que l'enfant